And this video, I should probably explain why I'm making this video. I've been wanting to do some video lectures, but it's kind of tough to incorporate that into the questions because it could get pretty subjective. But this week, as I was going through the archaeology of the Bible book, there was a lot of topics in there I wanted to discuss that the book didn't cover. And so I had a hard time coming up with questions, and I thought really what I want to do is just bring these things to your attention, whether or not I don't have to assess them, so I'm not going to assign any questions on this video. So really, it's going to end up being just for your own interest. But it is issues that I think you'll find are interesting, and it'll help explain, like for example, today I'm going to be talking about Jerusalem, and I want to explain to you how Jerusalem came to be, how it evolved over time. And so it's not really necessary for me to ask you questions. So if you get bored of this, feel free to shut it off. But I am assuming that if you took this class, you're just as big a nerd as I am, and you'll think these things are interesting. But it's completely optional. Anyway, this video is going to be primarily on Jerusalem. This video will probably take like 15 to 20 minutes. Then I'll do another one for Masada and Qumran, and as well as Herodian. So anyway, again, the gist here is this is mostly just to be able to share with you some things that I think are important, but I'm not going to ask you questions about. So that's why you have kind of an easy assignment this week with just, I think there's only like 6 or 7 questions in there. Anyway, with that, let's get started. Let's talk about Jerusalem. I'm going to bring up Google Maps here, and I'm already at Jerusalem. If realistically the video quality once it gets to YouTube it's gonna go down quite a bit. So if you want, go ahead and bring up another window while you're watching this video and go to maps.google, type in Jerusalem, and if you can follow along with me, you can see there's this gray spot, right? So you've got your wilderness, and that's obviously dead, and then your Shfela is gonna, well, Shfela is a little bit more west of here, but you can see how it starts getting green. The watershed ridge is causing drainage to move westward, and so that's why this is all green. And Jerusalem's right at the peak. You got that gray spot. Now, towards the wilderness side, if we zoom in real close, we get to an aerial view of what is the ancient city of Jerusalem. In modern times, when you go to modern Jerusalem, they'll ask you for you'll ask for the old city. That's what this is called, and it's the remains of ancient Jerusalem. Now, ancient Jerusalem has gone through a huge transformation from the Middle Bronze Age and into the Iron Age, and then of course the Roman Age. So what I want to do is give you an idea of what's left of the city, and then we'll go back to the beginning and I'll show you the progression. But that's why I'm showing you this here. I want you to have a basic idea of what things are going to end up looking like in the present Old City Jerusalem. Now, even at this distance, you should be able to make out the Dome of the Rock here. And hopefully the video quality is decent enough to where you can see a wall running northeast to southwest. This is one of the northern walls. It's called the second wall. And then you've got another wall running south to about this point here where my cursor is. And then it's going to curve back up into the temple corner here. And then of course it resumes on the north side of the Temple Mount back to that second wall. Now the Temple Mount as it is today is this larger rectangle. Those are the dimensions. Those are the dimensions of the Herodian temple, or the second temple. built by Herod. So that still remains. Now I want to point something out here. There is this wall that comes out of the southeastern corner, moves southwest at an angle. The reason I'm pointing this out is because the most original part of Jerusalem, the one that dates back all the way to the Jebusite Jerusalem or Middle Bronze, Jerusalem as David knew it, as Solomon knew it, as the Jebusites knew it, as Abraham knew it, really all of that is outside modern Old City Jerusalem. So if modern Old City Jerusalem is from here to here, it's ironic that for the vast majority of biblical history, Jerusalem is actually only this portion here. Now, I asked you in one of your worksheets the question of how much space does it take up, and the reason is because the Jerusalem of the New Testament is multiple times larger than what it was when David was in Jerusalem, or Solomon, or the kings, or Abraham. Jerusalem was originally just this little portion sticking out here. So that's why I wanted to show you that. Now I'm going to bring something up that makes this even more clear. Okay. This is a topography, or the topography of Jerusalem. And I wanted to show you this because obviously modern Jerusalem is covered in cement, and it's gone through a lot of changes on the surface. And in order to understand those changes, if we get a glimpse of how the natural topography works, and a lot of this stuff is going to make sense. Now, I told you about that second wall, right? Here it is. Hopefully you can see it. And you know what? Maybe I'll post these pictures on Moodle so you can follow along with me. But here's that northern wall I told you that runs from the northeast to southwest. It comes down to this corner here, and it curves back up into the Temple Mount, which today, in Herod's day, the southeast corner is here. The platform of the Temple Mount covers this hill here. You remember I told you that original Jerusalem is outside of the modern Old City walls? That's this portion here. So once you look at the topography, it makes a lot of sense that Jerusalem originally was just this southern tip, or this on this teardrop shaped extension here. So the reason why is because if you look at these deep valleys, you've got the Kidron Valley here on the eastern side. You know the Kidron Valley. You've been looking at those maps for a while. Then you've got the Valley of Hinnom over here. It runs south and then it takes a turn east. Then you've got your Cheesemaker Valley, which runs on the western side of this ridge. Here it is. So this teardrop portion or extension is very difficult to approach from the west, from the south, or the east. The only really safe way or comfortable way to approach is from the north. So if you're building a city and you want it to be well defended, you want to pick a city, or you want to pick a location that is most defensible and least vulnerable. This tip is that strategic spot. Any invading army, in fact, even Alexander the Great, when he approached Jerusalem, all have to come from the north. In fact, the only army that I know of, and this isn't to say that there isn't more, but the only one that I've heard of to attack from any direction except for the north is the Babylonian army. And I think the Babylonians are an exception because of just their insane power. But they attacked from Mount Olives. Anyway, So the Middle Bronze Age city, this dating back all the way to before Abraham, was a oval-shaped walled city that encompassed just this area down here. It actually went down into the slopes a little bit because to include some water sources, but it's just this little part. This northern hill here was left unprotected. It was just there. Now you can notice it is a little higher. So when David came and attacked, he found an entrance into the city. He took it, and it remained. This little section remained Jerusalem up until Solomon's day. There was no changes made to the general location of the city. Now, when Solomon built the temple, he built on what's now called the Temple Mount, and this is the Temple Mount. He didn't do a whole lot to it other than wall it off. He just created a wall at the highest point, and that's where the Ark of the Covenant was, and that's where worship took place. And I want you to think about the symbolism here. If you're in Jerusalem, you're the king of Jerusalem, and the only way to attack is from the north, Solomon probably had in mind some type of symbolism here by putting a Temple Mount on, or putting the Ark of the Covenant here in the Temple Mount versus on the Western Hill or Mount Olivet. And the rationale might have been, and this is just us trying to get into the minds of these guys in the Iron Age, that this is the only weak spot that Jerusalem has. And so by putting the Ark of the Covenant here, or building the temple here, Yahweh defends Jerusalem. There's that. And then there's, of course, the very much more practical aspect, which is then you've got more extra walls here. So if you wall off the Temple Mount, that means any army coming in has got to get through the first wall, the second wall. They've got to go through this little dip here, and then then you finally have to get through the Jerusalem wall. So you've got those two things going here. Great. So like I said, when Abraham came, Jerusalem was just here, and that stayed the same during David's time all the way into Solomon's time. Solomon walled off a portion of the Temple Mount and created the temple. And that's how it stayed for a very long time. Let me take a quick... I want to take a quick detour to look at how Solomon's project worked in comparison to topography. Now, this image you're seeing here has both the topography and Solomon's wall, but it also has around it Herod's wall, which would have been built in the Roman period, of course, during Jesus' days. And the reason I want to show you this is because I want you to compare Solomon's temple to Herod's later on. But for now, notice Solomon's wall is just a small portion. I don't know what archaeologists' consensus is, but it was probably just a hill still. It was just a walled hill. So that is, what I'm trying to say is Solomon didn't level out the hill once he put the walls around it. So you just put a regular wall around the hill. That's in contrast to what Herod is going to do, which is create these massive, massive walls and then create a flat platform upon which he's going to build his incredible temple. But that'll come later on. Okay, so hopefully that image shows this dark part is Solomon's temple. Now let's go back to topography. We've been talking a little. We just got through the exile. Now, if you remember what you read during Hezekiah's time, Jerusalem was still just a small portion here. Solomon's walls were already here. But after the Assyrians took Israel, Hezekiah was preparing for the Assyrians to move south, and that was very astute of him. Once the Assyrians took Israel, they really had nothing stopping them from going further south and taking the much weaker Judah. And so Hezekiah was very well aware that Jerusalem was next on the target. Now, what's interesting is that this is about the time that Hezekiah builds a wall around this massive western hill. And the modern old city walls aren't perfectly accurate. The walls probably came a little further south to down here, and he just and then they cut east right around here. But Hezekiah built this ginormous wall around this entire hill. Now consider the amount of space that Hezekiah is walling off in comparison to the Jerusalem of his day. What's probably happening is all of the refugees from Israel and all of the Judeans who are scared of the Assyrian threat look at Jerusalem as Yahweh's city that Yahweh will defend. And so a lot of these people who are either displaced already or are looking for safety flee to Jerusalem for the protection under Yahweh. So suddenly you've got this tiny little city inundated with refugees from all over Samaria, maybe we shouldn't call Samaria, but all over Israel and Judah, all fleeing to this tiny little city. Where are they gonna camp? It's gonna be the Western Hill. Well, Hezekiah decides to build a wall to defend them, and that's when Jerusalem first expands, makes its first major expand, and that's how this little hill gets walled. Later on, during the intertestamental period, the Hasmoneans are going to build more walls, and they're going to roughly follow Hezekiah's walls, except I think the second wall actually extends further, but I don't know from memory, so I should probably just leave that alone. Okay, so those are the walls. Now, this video is already at 17 minutes, so what I'll do is I'll pause here, and then I want to go and look at the temple in more detail, but I'll do that in another video. In any case, the real gist of this video is just to show you the topography. I want to explain the size of original Jerusalem, when, how, and why it expanded to include this Temple Mount, and when it was this Western Hill was included. I just as a quick last note, Gehenna is actually the term that the Greeks is used in the New Testament for one of the words for hell, and the name is derived from Gai Hinnom. Gai is the Hebrew word for a valley. It's a steep, sharp valley, and here it is here. And Hinnom was a man in his family, so this valley was originally called Gai ben Hinnom, or the Valley of the Sons of Hinnom. It eventually became shortened to just Gai Hinnom, and then translated into Greek became Gehenna. And you've got these slippery slopes into Gai Hinnom, or Gehenna, and that's kind of where we get the idea of hell from. And also because of the cultic activity occurring in this little valley. Anyway, excuse my kind of how disorganized this presentation is, but I hope you found it interesting and or helpful.